PTF and JK back with you, the In the Money Media YouTube channel, doing our first top 10 video with the two of us for the year 2025. JK, eager to get your thoughts on some of these horses, and let's dive right in with the first one on our list. And this one I'm really interested in because people are really of two minds when it comes to Disco Time. Is he the horse that made this wild, visually impressive 9-wide move last time supposed to be upgraded? Or are we supposed to see the 74 Beyer speed figure and say, next?
Well, you know how I am when it comes to these speed figures. I think I'm more of a next type, and not the gray horse that likes to run a mile and 3/4. For me, this feels like a situation where right place, right time. I understand that he's undefeated, and that's something that you definitely want to take into consideration, but he's not particularly fast, and he got a pretty big setup last time. The pace fell apart in a sloppy racetrack that might have really moved him up. Not this time, Colt. I think Disco Time is one of those horses you want to wait for down the line to kind of prove it to you. He's not one that I would necessarily fall in love with at this stage based on the way he's run so far.
I'm happy with his position on this list. Eric DeCoster, our content producer here at In the Money Media, who does write-ups for us about the Derby over at inthemoneypodcast.com. Happy this horse is on the list. Happy to talk about him. But I'm with you. I'm not so much, I'm not interested so much as I want to see more. A horse we're going to see more from this very weekend, JK, is Ferocious. This one stamped himself as a Derby contender in his very first start up at Saratoga with that huge Beyer speed figure. He hasn't run back to that number, but he has run second in a pair of Grade 1 races since, and I think you can argue things just didn't set up for him at all in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He is a very interesting item to me in the Holy Bull Stakes, and I think he could be moving up on this list the next time we do one of these videos. What do you think about Ferocious?
Yeah, absolutely. If it was an objective, not an objective list, but more of a personal list for me, he would be significantly higher. I think Ferocious is very interesting. I fell in love with what he did in his debut, and I thought that his subsequent starts, like you mentioned, those second-place finishes in Grade 1 races against good horses, East Avenue and Chancer McPatrick, are a lot better than they look on paper. The other thing I'll say is I'm just a complete toss when it comes to his Breeders' Cup. He just didn't show up. He didn't run his race the way that he's supposed to, the way that you want from him. And that next morning, I remember checking in with his owner, Ramiro Restrepo, and Ramiro said blinkers next time. He had called it the day after the race. You're seeing those blinkers come on for this Holy Bull, and let's see if that can wake Ferocious up.
Blinkers will often help a horse that sort of stops and starts in the way he runs, which visually did appear to be going on last time. Huge change for Ferocious. Let's get on to Sandman. This horse was already on Eric DeCoster's radar, already on the Derby list before the last run. People have probably seen the picture on social media. Nearly loses the jockey in the early stage of the race in the Southwest. Runs on huge. This horse really looks like one with a big future. How excited are you about Sandman?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this horse. I thought he ran extremely well. He had a really big trip. He's got a ton of experience, too. I think when you have these types of horses, having that foundation, it used to be as a 2-year-old, but sometimes it can be just running a lot as a 3-year-old as well. I think Sandman has that experience. You learn a lot about what you have when they can overcome adversity like he did to run as well as he did to run second. I thought that was the kind of trip that was a real trip with real trouble. A lot of times in this Derby trail, people get carried away with a horse getting stopped or the pace being fast. I thought this one was actually a significant trip.
Let's talk about the 2-year-old champion, another horse who's back in action this weekend in the Bob Baffert team scrimmage out in Southern California. Citizen Bull. I'm going to stick with my opinion that with East Avenue not breaking, the juvenile didn't end up being a true test. This was the horse that was able to take advantage. The horse that was second in their gaming, certainly done nothing for the form since. I need to see more from Citizen Bull, but there's no way I'd make a top 10 list that wouldn't have the 2-year-old champ on it. Am I underrating him?
Yeah, look, he's going to have to prove it to me. I didn't like him going into the juvenile. In fact, it was one of the most shocking results that I saw through those 2 days at the Breeders' Cup out at Del Mar. I just don't quite trust him. He wasn't that good prior to the race, and like you said, everything kind of fell into his lap. Now, look, he could grow up and turn into be a real horse here, and he could show up and mature and continue to get better for Bob Baffert. No one has ever, never not expected a Bob Baffert runner to continue to progress on the Derby trail, but he's not one that I'd necessarily need at this point based on what he's accomplished. But ask me Monday, maybe I'll have changed my mind.
Number 6 on the list is journalism trainer Michael McCarthy, very well represented on this list. This is a horse who shaped very much like a colt with a future last time. Another race where you could have some questions about the form, but I'm very excited about him, very eager to see where he runs next.
Well, look, he's like you mentioned, he does look very similar to a horse that looks to be progressing, and we'll see a little bit later on this list from Michael McCarthy. The thing about journalism is he's passed that 2-turn test already, that mile and a 16th, which goes a long way. Now, Michael McCarthy's not the type of trainer that I feel like is going to try to stuff, the square peg, round hole thing, whichever one it is. He's not going to do that. If he has a horse that's not going to go that far, he'll typically try to find a way to find them a way to be successful. Look at City of Light, for instance, running this horse in the dirt mile. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this one progresses for Michael McCarthy, and it's completely reasonable that he will, but I will say to this point, at least he's passed the 2-turn test.
Want to tell you that our video has 2 sponsors today. One, Twin Spires and their tournaments program. Lots of great opportunities. There's a new major, the Kentucky Derby Betting Challenge. You can win your way in. twinspires.com/tournaments. Also, In the Money Plus. This is a way to get even more content, even more picks, even more free analysis than the stuff we do for you normally on the In the Money Media Network, whether it's podcasts, the YouTube channel, or our website, inthemoneypodcast.com. Learn more about In the Money Plus, inthemoneypodcast.com/plus. JK, we're on to the top 5. Here's a horse that some have disparaged. I am still squarely in his camp. Chancer McPatrick, to me, a horse that absolutely deserves another chance to show what he can do. Might be a horse that ends up needing a setup a little bit, but hey, you often get a setup in the Kentucky Derby for a closer. This one's got a lot of talent, and I'm not writing him off just yet.
I have a hard time ignoring a horse who's won 2 grade 1s and 2 of the biggest grade 1s that we have in this country, right? For 2-year-olds, especially with the Hopeful and also the Champagne. He ran so well. He showed so much talent. I just can't ignore that. I will say this. I do want to see a different version of Chancer McPatrick as a 3-year-old. I want to see him grow up a little bit. I want to see him not have as much work to do, be a little bit closer, a little bit more connected. But he's shown enough talent for me to believe that that possible change is there. And I'm looking forward to seeing if he can do that. He's in the right hands with a Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer, in Chad Brown. And the way that Chad trains his horses, I think it fits horses like this. We saw what he did with Sierra Leone last year and these kind of long-distance dirt races. I think Chancer still has a chance, no pun intended, to continue on this trail.
Let's talk about a horse that looked poised to win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile before nearly falling on his face at the break. East Avenue didn't show much that day, but when a speed horse doesn't break, I'll excuse it. He'd shown brilliance before that. He deserves another chance. I'm happy to have him in the top 5 of this list. Maybe one I'm not going to necessarily bet the next time he runs, but one I very much have on the radar for the Kentucky Derby. Where are you with East Avenue?
Yeah, another one that would be higher for me. I'm a big fan of this horse, and I have a little insight. I ran into Brendan Walsh, and I've talked to him about it before, but I ran into him this weekend at the Pegasus, and we were talking about East Avenue. His eyes light up when he's talking about it. He's very excited about this horse. I think he's very frustrated about the way that he ran in the Breeders' Cup, but he also gave a little bit more insight. When he broke slowly in the way that he did, he says that Tyler spent almost the first half of the race wondering if the horse was okay, because he had stumbled so badly and he didn't feel great underneath him at the first part of the stage. East Avenue eventually kind of found himself and ended up being fine, but Tyler wasn't comfortable in the first part of that race, didn't persevere with him. I don't think that was the real East Avenue. I think we'll see the real East Avenue as they get back on the track with this horse as a 3-year-old, and I think he's definitely a contender for this year's Kentucky Derby.
Get out your bingo cards, because next up we have one of the phrases that we've uttered so many times in the 10-year now history of the Players Podcast. Bill Mott with a target. Nobody better at picking out a spot months away and having a horse get there in good shape. Perhaps Sovereignty could join that type of horse's number. This one's been impressive already in his races, winning the street sense rather easily. Tons the best in that spot, and a horse that I'm very excited to see. When I made my own personal top 10 list, JK, this horse was number one. Where would Sovereignty be for you?
Yeah, look, I don't get too carried away with the horse for course thing that he won at Churchill already, but I do think that if you're at this stage, you're looking for positive and negatives, it's definitely a positive that he's passed a two-turn test at Churchill Downs. I think that does go a long way. He's in a Hall of Famer's hands in Bill Mott. He should continue to improve. Like you said, Bill Mott's not one of those guys that's not going to have his horses continue to take steps forward. Rather than you're not going to see their best performance and then go the other direction. They usually can gradually improve. And Sovereignty feels like one of those horses that can do that. And his pedigree also kind of makes you a little warm and fuzzy when you think about what he could do as the distances get a little bit longer.
Number two on the list, we mentioned the great representation that Michael McCarthy has. It continues with Bullard. This horse was actually number one on the first Derby list that Eric DeCoster put together for us. And while he was third in the comeback race in the 7 furlong San Vicente, he really didn't lose much in defeat. This horse was very wide on a day when it seemed like ground loss mattered. And this just seemed like a starting point on a horse that's going to get better, given his pedigree being by Gun Runner. It's tough to decide for me which of the McCarthy runners I'm more excited about. Eric has Bullard in the number two spot. Really excited to see how he does when he passes that two-turn test you talked about, JK. What's your gut? Will he be able to do it with aplomb?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think the same theme can apply for these top two horses. Is the first thing that you need to win the Kentucky Derby is talent and speed. It's the only two things you really need. And the third thing is then stamina. So while yes, of course, we want to see if they can pass those tests as the races get a little bit longer, they got to check those first two boxes. And I think that Bullard has done that, right? He has shown that he has some talent. He has shown that he has some speed. And now he just needs to kind of gradually check the box of being able to handle the added distance. And I don't think that'll be a problem for him. Like I said, Michael McCarthy does an outstanding job. He comes from the school of Todd Pletcher. We know the success that Todd's had in long distance races, specifically with 3-year-olds. I know the Derby was elusive for Todd for a while, but once he kind of broke the seal, he started winning them. And I think Michael McCarthy's got a couple of Kentucky Derbies with his name on them as well.
Number one on the list, the horse that beat Bullard pretty soundly in the San Vicente at even money. It was Barnes. This one named after Bob Baffert's top assistant, who was so instrumental with so many horses. But I always think about the very clear relationship he had with American Pharoah when I think about Jimmy Barnes. But this one, whether it's soft angles like that or hard angles like the numbers he's run on the track and being undefeated, I think he deserves a place high up on this list. I'm not sure if I would have gone quite number one. That's where Eric has him. Give me your thoughts on Barnes.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's high in terms of what he's accomplished so far, but I think from a hype standpoint, he does probably deserve to be this high on the list from what we've seen so far, unless you want to go with some of the more established types like an East Avenue, a Chancer McPatrick, or a Citizen Bull. But I will say this about Barnes. You know, you don't spend the money you spend on a horse like this, over $3 million if I'm not mistaken, if you think the horse is only going to go one turn, right? You spend that money because the pedigree is screaming at you. If this horse is good, you can win the Kentucky Derby. And I think that's exactly why the horse got a coveted name in Barnes. Another thing, I don't think Bob Baffert and the rest of the syndicate, the Avengers, as it were, are going to throw around that name lightly as well with their respect that they have for Jimmy Barnes. I think he's one of those horses that, while I'm not impressed so far with his speed figures, once he gets around those two-turn tests and he continues to grow up, it might just be that number jumps up and you get that special Bob Baffert going into the Kentucky Derby performance out of him. I definitely think he deserves to be on the radar. I'm not cutting in line to bet any future wagers on Barnes at this point, but I do think he's definitely one you want to keep your eye on. And you mentioned American Pharoah. I remember Bob saying that they shipped American Pharoah to Oaklawn because they knew that he could handle it from his mind. They knew he was special. And I think sending Barnes for his debut at Churchill Downs is also probably in that same camp. This is probably a pretty smart special horse.
That was a significant race for Baffert. That was his first winner since being reinstated at Churchill after a couple of years on the sidelines. He's back in the Derby. You mentioned Barnes' pedigree by Into Mischief. Needs no introduction if you know anything about bloodstock, and actually out of an American Pharoah dam called All American Dream. We'll see how these all get on. We'll have another top 10 list for you soon. In the meantime, if you want more from us, make sure you subscribe to the In the Money Media YouTube channel. Lots of exclusive content. There's a prep race video up on the Holy Bull Stakes right now with me and Mikey P. Click that notification bell so you never miss any of our YouTube exclusive content. That's it for PTF and JK, but we'll see you very soon.